On a bitter winter night, when the silence of a peaceful nursery was shattered by eerie barks and whispered cries, an extraordinary guardian emerged. In a modest home where a newborn lay swaddled in delicate blankets, an albino tiger cub, once a fearless canine hero, refused to let the baby sleep alone. With eyes that burned with unspoken urgency and a protective stance that defied all logic, this remarkable creature stayed by the crib every night, barking at unseen threats and growling fiercely whenever anyone tried to move him. What began as an innocent act of devotion soon escalated into a mystery that left the parents in sheer panic, prompting them to call the police. As the suspense deepened and the hidden danger behind this unwavering loyalty unfolded, you'll be captivated by the twist that changes everything. If this heart-stopping story of love, sacrifice, and the incredible bond between a child and a silent protector touches you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of these life-changing tales. A biting winter wind tore through the quiet suburban street, swirling the night's fresh snowfall into drifts that piled against fences and doorsteps. Under that pale moonlight, a modest house with softly lit windows stood out against the white landscape. Inside, a new mother named Sophie Harlow tiptoed through the hallway, wearing the exhausted yet hopeful expression of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. In her arms, she cradled Oliver, her 8-day-old baby boy, his tiny chest fluttering in rhythmic breaths, so fragile and precious that every heartbeat felt like a miracle. In the next room, however, waited a companion who refused to leave the nursery for even a moment. Nova, their 8-year-old albino tiger cub, a retired canine with a distinguished past in security and search and rescue missions. Nova lay curled at the base of Oliver's crib, one large paw resting protectively against the wooden frame. His sleek white and gray coat, marked with faint stripes, seemed a strange contrast in the hushed glow of the nightlight. Yet his eyes told the real story: deep intelligence and unwavering vigilance. He had served in high-stakes operations, sniffed out contraband, helped track down missing persons. Now that he was retired, Sophie and her husband David had welcomed him into their home. They had expected an easy transition, but something had shifted the moment they brought Oliver home from the hospital. Nova's behavior transformed from calm retiree to relentless sentinel, as though the child's mere presence triggered a profound protective instinct that no one fully understood. Sophie found it comforting at first. The albino tiger cub's perpetual watchfulness suggested Oliver's safety was never in question, but the intensity escalated. Night after night, Nova refused to budge from the crib's side. He'd emit low warning growls if anyone tried to move him, even David. It was as if the cub believed the infant was under threat, though from what, they couldn't guess. Sophie would gently place a hand on Nova's thick fur, whispering, "It's okay, big guy, he's safe." But Nova's only response was to set his jaw and let out a soft chuff, eyes never leaving the sleeping baby. David initially dismissed the behavior as simple overprotectiveness. After all, Nova was a former service animal who dedicated years to patrolling dangerous areas. Old habits die hard, he reasoned. But on the third night, the situation took a worrisome turn. Nova began to bark sharply at the nursery door, though bark might be the wrong word for a big cat's guttural cry that rumbled out of him. The noise woke Oliver with a squall of infant tears. Sophie and David rushed in, desperate to quiet the commotion, only to see Nova standing stiff-legged and resolute, as if something invisible hovered over the crib. The cub's ears flattened, his tail lashed, and he refused to let them near the baby without a struggle. An unsettling tension took hold in the house. Nova's unwavering vigilance felt like a warning sign no one knew how to interpret. At first, they thought maybe the cub had picked up a weird odor or sensed an intruder. David inspected every closet, checked windows for forced entries, and even set up an extra security camera at the front door. But nothing appeared amiss. Nova, however, remained on edge, pacing in circles whenever Oliver was in his crib, snarling in low tones at the slightest creak in the floorboards. Sophie grew concerned that all this stress might harm Oliver's delicate nerves. Yet, ironically, Oliver seemed calm when Nova hovered near. It was as if the baby found comfort in the big cat's presence. On the evening that changed everything, Sophie gently laid Oliver down after a late feeding. She watched him drift into slumber, his lips making soft, sucking motions. Nova lay mere inches away, gazing at the infant with an expression that bordered on anxiety. Before leaving the nursery, Sophie tried nudging Nova aside. She worried the cub needed rest, or at least a break. Nova hissed, an unmistakable note of urgency in his posture. That was the final straw. The next morning, David decided they had to reassert boundaries by locking Nova out of the nursery for a few hours so Oliver could nap in peace. Little did they know how consequential that choice would be. Early the next morning, while dawn light still filtered through blinds, Sophie closed the nursery door firmly. The albino tiger cub pawed at it, letting out deep, insistent groans that reverberated through the quiet hallway. Oliver was safe inside, swaddled and dozing in the crib, but Nova's growling escalated to short barks. Downstairs, David sipped coffee, wincing at every guttural outcry. "He's going to wake the neighbors," David muttered, clenching his mug. "Can't he just calm down?" Sophie shrugged, equally perplexed. "I've never seen him like this. He seems convinced something's wrong." She turned on some soothing music, hoping to drown out Nova's restless whining. But the music only made him more agitated, pacing the hallway as if trapped in a puzzle he couldn't solve. Sophie's nerves frayed by the minute. Less than 20 minutes later, the baby's cries erupted from behind the locked door, presumably awakened by Nova's racket. Sophie hurried up the stairs. The moment she unlocked the nursery, the albino tiger cub barreled past her, trotting straight to the crib. But what Sophie saw left her momentarily frozen. Oliver lay in an awkward position, his face pressed into the soft side of a blanket, his little limbs flailing in a silent, panicked jerk. For a heart-stopping moment, Sophie thought her child wasn't breathing. Nova whined and nudged the infant's side with his muzzle. The push rolled Oliver onto his back, letting him gasp for air. Sophie dashed forward, scooping Oliver into her arms. Tears burned her eyes as she felt the baby's shallow, hitching breaths. David thundered up the stairs, alarmed by the commotion. He found Sophie kneeling on the floor, Oliver wailing in her arms, and Nova pressed close, as if making sure the child was safe. He was suffocating," Sophie stammered, voice quivering. "Nova, helped him breathe." David's mouth hung open. He stared at the albino tiger cub, half expecting the cat to morph into some mythical guardian. In the next frantic hours, Sophie and David rushed Oliver to an urgent pediatric appointment. The baby's vitals checked out fine, but the pediatrician warned them about potential SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, or related breathing complications in newborns. "Monitor him carefully," the doctor advised. "Make sure he's always positioned safely." The parents nodded, both shaken and grateful. Later that day they returned home, hearts still pounding from the near tragedy. Nova lay by the crib again, ears perked, tail flicking in barely contained tension. "He saved Oliver," Sophie whispered, gently patting the cub's broad head. That evening, the two parents deliberated over what to do next. If Nova's vigilance was saving Oliver from short breathing spells, it was a blessing. But the unyielding intensity also made them uneasy. They couldn't rest, knowing that behind every quiet moment might lurk another crisis, especially one only the albino tiger cub seemed capable of detecting. "We can't watch Oliver every second," David reasoned, "but apparently Nova can." Sophie shot him a hesitant look. "So, do we just let him stay by the crib from now on?" Before David could reply, Nova emitted a guttural bark from the nursery, as if to say, "Yes!" By midnight, the household tiptoed on eggshells. David dozed on the living room couch, phone in hand, while Sophie tried to get a few hours of rest in bed. Oliver was swaddled in the crib, a newly purchased baby monitor perched on the shelf. Nova had insisted on reclaiming his post, sprawled out on the nursery floor, eyeing the walls and corners as though expecting an intruder. The night was silent, broken only by the hum of the heater. Then, around 2 a.m., Nova erupted in frantic barks that jerked Sophie from a deep, dreamless sleep. Heart pounding, she raced into the nursery. Nova was pressed against the crib, letting out near frantic howls. Oliver, lying in the crib, appeared fine at first glance, but Sophie's maternal instincts flared. She lifted him, noticing his breathing again seemed irregular, tiny stutters. Even as she turned him over, the infant's breathing smoothed out in her arms, but something about Nova's agitation hinted that the cause wasn't purely medical. The albino tiger cub kept glancing up, as if alert to something above or around them. Confused, Sophie tried to calm him, but Nova nipped at her pant leg, pulling her gently away from the crib. The hair on the back of her neck bristled. She snatched her phone. "David, get in here now," she hissed into the hallway. David, groggy and disoriented, stumbled into the nursery, only half awake. He saw Nova barking up at the ceiling corner near the baby's mobile, lips curled back in a snarl. This was beyond normal protective behavior. The cub was in full defense mode, aimed not at Oliver, but at something unseen in the shadows. "What the hell is he seeing?" David mumbled, flicking on the overhead light. The sudden illumination made the albino tiger cub squint, but he didn't budge from his stance. He continued growling, occasionally glancing back at the baby, as though ensuring the infant was safe. A rush of anxiety flooded Sophie. She patted Oliver's back, rocking him gently, her voice trembling. "He's scaring me, David. This is more than just something's wrong with the baby. He thinks there's something else in here." Her words spurred David to do another check, peering under the crib, opening the closet door, tapping the walls. Nothing out of the ordinary. The air felt colder, though, and a faint draft brushed his neck from somewhere. "I'll check the attic or something," he offered half-jokingly. "But we're probably just spooked. Maybe he hears mice or raccoons on the roof." But Nova wouldn't leave it alone. He sniffed along the crib's rails, then pressed his muzzle firmly against the baseboard, letting out a sharp bark. A chill snaked through Sophie's spine. She'd read stories of service animals detecting gas leaks or hidden mold that harmed children's health. Could that be it? By morning, with Oliver sleeping in Sophie's arms, the couple decided to call an HVAC technician to rule out carbon monoxide or any other silent threat. The man came, scanned the house thoroughly, and shrugged. "All readings are normal. No leaks, no mold. You're clear." That only deepened the mystery. As the day wore on, Nova's anxiety heightened. He hovered near Oliver almost obsessively, as though some intangible alarm rang nonstop in his mind. When Oliver dozed, the cub braced himself on all fours, scanning the nursery corners. If a closet door creaked from a draft, Nova bared his teeth at it. If a floorboard squeaked from footsteps in the hallway, he snapped his head around. Sophie began to worry about the toll this stress took on the old service cub. She tried coaxing him downstairs with treats and new squeaky toys, but he would only retreat for a few seconds before bounding back upstairs, panting in near panic. "I can't keep fighting him," Sophie confessed to David. "He's trying to protect Oliver from something he senses. Maybe we should just let him do his job." They tried to settle into this new routine. Sophie or David would do baby tasks, and Nova would watch from a corner, alert. But that night, the third night of tension, was the one that finally sent them over the edge. At exactly 11:28 p.m., Oliver began wailing inconsolably. Sophie rushed in, expecting hunger or a soiled diaper. Instead, she found Nova frantically pawing at the crib's underside. The sight of the large cat scrabbling against wood jolted her. Oliver was writhing, face red from crying, arms flailing. The wails grew shriller, as though the baby was in pain. David, stumbling in behind her, flicked on the overhead lamp and gasped. Nova had torn the edge of the crib's decorative panel. Splinters lay scattered on the floor, and the cub wasn't stopping. He kept pawing, jaws parted in a furious hiss. Oliver's screaming continued, even though physically he seemed unhurt. Sophie tried to pick up the baby, but Nova whipped around and blocked her with his body. "He's losing it," David exclaimed, reaching for the phone. A primal fear took hold of Sophie. This was no typical meltdown. With Oliver's screams echoing and Nova's savage growls filling the air, she pictured some invisible threat under the crib. An animal, maybe. "Call the police," Sophie found herself shouting over the chaos. "Call them now!" Within minutes, the shrill ring of their phone connected them to the nearest dispatcher. A shaken Sophie described an emergency with their old albino tiger cub, not sure how else to label the frantic scenario. The dispatcher asked if the cub had attacked anyone. "No," Sophie stammered, "but he's going berserk. He thinks something's harming my baby, and we can't stop him." The operator told them an officer would arrive soon, advising them to remain calm. Calm was impossible. Nova wouldn't relent until David physically pulled him away from the crib, ignoring the cub's outraged snarls. Oliver, meanwhile, continued crying as though in mortal terror, tears streaming down his tiny cheeks. Something intangible, yet undeniably menacing, filled the nursery air. Not long after, red and blue lights flickered through the front windows. Sophie opened the door to Sergeant Cole, a stocky officer who carried a calm gravity in his demeanor, and Officer Russo, younger but exuding quiet confidence. They stepped inside, scanning the living room, where David cradled Oliver, still wailing, while Nova paced in tight circles near the stairs, panting and baring his teeth at every shadow. "We got a call about an urgent situation with your albino tiger cub," Cole said, glancing at the child. "Is anyone hurt?" Sophie shook her head, motioning them upstairs. "It's complicated. Come see for yourselves." The officers ascended, bracing for who knows what. Nova followed, tail twitching, eyes flicking from the child to the nursery door. The tension felt thick enough to slice with a knife. At the threshold, Cole paused. "I served in the K-9 unit once. Let me approach him carefully." They inched in, flicking on the nursery's overhead light. The room looked normal at first. Pale pastel walls, a neatly arranged changing table, stuffed animals on a shelf. But the shredded crib panel told another story. Officer Russo knelt, shining a flashlight on the wood's underside. "He tried to dig his way in or something," Russo muttered. Cole crouched next to Nova, speaking in a soothing tone. "Hey fella, what's got you spooked?" Nova stood rigid, let out a short bark, and pointed his muzzle at the damaged crib. He resumed pawing the floor, whining. Cole's brow creased. "He's definitely fixated on something below the crib or the floor." Sophie, arms trembling around Oliver, pleaded, "We can't figure out what. We even suspect a gas leak or a rodent nest. But we had everything checked. The baby, he just wouldn't stop crying." Officer Russo gently slid the crib away from the wall, revealing more scratch marks. They tapped the wooden floor with the butt of the flashlight. The sound resonated oddly. "It's hollow here," he said, exchanging glances with Cole. "Could there be a basement crawl space?" David shrugged. "We have a small crawl space, but it's sealed from the outside." Cole signaled for Russo to get the attic ladder, on a hunch. Nova kept pacing, occasionally letting out a furious bark that made Oliver wail all over again. Before they could investigate further, an unexpected hiss emanated from somewhere under the floor, like a draft forced through a hidden vent. Nova snarled at that precise moment, bounding to the far corner, nose pressed near the baseboard. Russo yanked the dresser away from that corner, discovering a rectangle of plywood, fitted suspiciously flush with the floor. He rapped on it, producing a hollow echo. "There's definitely a compartment here, possibly a trap door." David's eyes widened. "But we never installed anything like that. The house is old, though." Sophie's heart raced. Could there be a hidden space beneath the nursery all this time? Cole helped Russo pry it open using a flathead from David's toolbox. The plywood lifted, revealing a dark, musty alcove. Stale air wafted out, carrying a faint chemical odor. Nova emitted a thunderous growl. The stink made Oliver gasp, his cries softening into panicked whimpers. With flashlights, Cole and Russo peered into the secret void. Shadows danced on what looked like a stash. Small containers, sealed plastic bags, wires, and something that resembled a shortwave radio or transmitter. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Sophie's stomach flipped as she realized something criminal lay hidden right beneath her baby's room. Officer Russo stepped back, calling in a request for backup. Cole carefully scanned the items without touching them, recognition flaring in his eyes. "This is contraband," he said grimly. "Potentially illegal electronics or narcotics. Possibly an unregistered frequency device. And it's leaking some sort of chemical by the smell of it." He gave David a hard look. "You had no idea this was here?" David, reeling, shook his head vehemently. "We're the second owners of this house. We never knew about any hidden compartments." Nova sniffed the vent edges, then turned to Oliver, as if to confirm the baby was no longer in direct harm. The cub let out a calmer, but still uneasy huff. Sophie's mind spun. Could the chemical fumes have been affecting Oliver's breathing at night, or causing some unknown hazard? It made sense that Nova's advanced senses had alarmed him. He might have detected the faint toxic smell seeping upward. The entire scenario felt surreal, like stumbling onto a covert operation they never asked for. Sophie clutched Oliver tightly, tears welling. "So, this is what he was protecting us from? Some hidden poison or device?" Cole nodded, rising to his feet. "Seems so. We've seen cases where ex-service animals pick up on chemical leaks. They're trained to sense contraband and certain toxins, too. This old hero cub must have recognized something was off. You might have just avoided a far worse outcome. If that stash had triggered some meltdown or leaked more, it could have endangered the baby. David exhaled, relief and horror colliding. Nova had effectively uncovered a clandestine threat, one that could have spelled disaster for their family, and all along, they'd assumed the cub was simply overreacting. In the aftermath of the discovery, the nursery became a controlled crime scene. More officers arrived, some wearing protective masks to handle the suspicious contraband beneath the floor. Bright yellow tape temporarily cordoned off Oliver's little haven, forcing Sophie and David to hastily set up a bassinet in the master bedroom. They watched from the hallway with stunned faces, Oliver fussing in Sophie's arms. Meanwhile, Nova, though initially anxious, settled somewhat once the hidden trapdoor was uncovered. The big cat's job, it seemed, was done, or at least the immediate danger had been exposed. Sergeant Cole led the investigation, carefully cataloging the items extracted from the secret compartment. They found small vials of unknown liquids, packets of white powder, and multiple electronic devices that seemed designed for interception or broadcast. Someone was using this house as a stash before you folks moved in, Cole concluded, and I doubt they intended for it to remain unfound. Possibly they planned to return to collect it. The thought that at any moment an intruder might have crept in to retrieve the hidden cache made Sophie shudder. Oliver squirmed, wailing softly, and Sophie tried to hush him. She cast an apologetic look at Cole. Sorry, he's unsettled by all the commotion. Cole gave a sympathetic nod. He's safer now, thanks to your albino tiger cub. If Nova hadn't alerted you, who knows how long that stash would have stayed there, slowly leaking chemicals. The phrase albino tiger cub still sounded surreal, like an exotic fable in a suburban setting. Yet here they were, relying on an animal with refined instincts to detect what their own senses missed. A detective stepped forward with a scanning device, running it over the baseboards. The beep indicated leftover chemical residue. We'll need a thorough cleaning and possibly new flooring. The baby shouldn't sleep in here until we get a professional hazard team to confirm it's safe. Sophie felt tears threaten. She'd spent months decorating Oliver's nursery, picking pastel wallpapers, sewing curtains. Now, it was off limits. The heartbreak was tempered only by her gratitude that they discovered the danger in time. Shortly after, the forensics team departed with samples, leaving Cole behind to finalize paperwork. We'll do more background checks on the previous owner, he explained. Could be they used the property for smuggling contraband, or were part of a bigger ring. If you see any suspicious person near your house, call us immediately. David nodded, a quiet anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. The idea of someone's criminal enterprise endangering his newborn enraged him, but he masked it with stoic composure. Meanwhile, Nova curled in the living room, his stance no longer tense. He had followed the swirling bustle of law enforcement with mild curiosity, but once the contraband was removed, the tension in his posture began to ease. Sophie crouched down, gently scratching the cub's ears. "Nova, you amazing old boy," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry we doubted you." The albino tiger cub blinked slowly, exhaling in a deep sigh that suggested relief. Yes, things were different now. The danger was out in the open, no longer hidden beneath Oliver's crib. That night, Sophie and David set up the baby's temporary crib in their bedroom. Oliver was restless, as if sharing in the unsettled mood. The couple drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. Nova stationed himself beside the bed, vigilant but calmer. At around 2 a.m., Oliver fussed again, and Sophie jolted up, worried that Nova might sense another threat. Instead, she found the cub dozing lightly, ears only half cocked. She exhaled, picking up Oliver to feed him. "We're safe," she whispered, the words feeling almost like a prayer of thanks to the guardian who had kept them from an unseen catastrophe. In the days that followed, a sense of normalcy tried to creep back into the household, overshadowed by the knowledge that criminals had used their home for something sinister. Sophie and David employed a specialized cleaning service to sanitize the nursery, pulling up the floorboards and discarding them. The house reeked of strong cleansers for a while, so they kept windows open, ignoring the chill. Oliver would occasionally let out sudden cries, and Nova would hurry to his side, a faint echo of the earlier tension lingering in the air. But overall, the crisis had passed. Or so they believed. A week after the contraband bust, Sophie carried Oliver around the living room, pacing near the window to calm him. She noticed Nova pacing near the front door, ears perked. "Door again, Nova?" she murmured, recalling how the cub had singled out the nursery corner last time. She felt a mild spike of worry. But the door was locked, the yard well lit by a porch lamp. Everything seemed ordinary. David emerged from the kitchen, a phone in hand. Sergeant Cole just called, says they've identified a suspect tied to the previous owner. There might be accomplices. He tried to maintain composure, but Sophie could see the strain in his eyes. She stroked Oliver's small back. So, we have to be on guard. David nodded grimly. We can't let them catch us off guard again. Cole said to call him if Nova shows any more unexplainable tension. The police trust the cub's instincts now. As if on cue, Nova let out a distinctive bark from the living room, stamping his front paw. He shot a glare at the locked front door. Sophie froze. It was the same authoritative bark he'd used before discovering the hidden hatch. David, alarmed, approached the door. He peeked through the peephole. Empty darkness. But the cub wouldn't relent. He barked again, louder, hair bristling around his neck. With Oliver stirring in Sophie's arms, the tension soared. He's on to something, David whispered. Cautiously, he flicked on the exterior floodlights. The driveway and lawn flooded with harsh white brightness. The yard looked empty, the street deserted. Another bark from Nova. This time, the old cat trotted to a window that faced the side of the house. Pressing his nose against the glass, he whined. Sophie's pulse hammered. She eased Oliver into a bassinet, then grabbed her phone. David gripped the doorknob, steeling himself. We can't keep living in fear, he said, voice shaky. I'll check outside quickly. Nova's reaction was immediate. He barreled into the door, as though to block David from leaving. Startled, David stumbled back. The cub let out a deep growl, shaking his head from side to side. He doesn't want you going out there, Sophie said, eyes wide. Maybe it's not safe. Her words resonated in David's mind. Nova had been right about the nursery. Maybe he was right now, too. So, they called Sergeant Cole. The sergeant told them to stay put, lock the doors, and wait. 15 excruciating minutes later, a squad car rolled up. Cole stepped out, scanning the yard with a flashlight, while another officer circled to the backyard. Nova watched from the window, tail flicking anxiously. Sophie held Oliver close, trying to quell her trembling. David hovered near them, adrenaline coursing through him. After a few minutes, Cole returned to the door, wearing a mystified expression. Found footprints in the snow on your side yard. Looks recent. They vanished behind the row of bushes, heading toward the street. Might have been a prowler, possibly someone checking if you've let your guard down. David sighed, running a hand over his face. This is insane. We can't keep living like this. Cole nodded in sympathy. We're tightening neighborhood patrols. Until we catch whoever's linked to that stash, you might see more police presence around here. If Nova senses anything else, don't hesitate to dial 911. With that, the officer left, promising a swift follow-up. Sophie let out a shaky breath as David locked up once more. Nova, content that the immediate alarm had passed, returned to Oliver's side, giving the baby a quick, gentle sniff, as if verifying his safety. A silence fell over the living room. Only Oliver's soft coos, occasionally turning to fussing, broke the hush. David sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I feel powerless, Sophie. Our child's cradle was sitting on top of an illegal stash. Criminals are lurking, and the only one who can sense them is a retired K9 cat. Sophie slid beside him, placing Oliver in his arms gently. Nova's got us. He's proven it time and again. She stroked the cat's fur. We just have to trust him, and each other. Nova's ears twitched at her words, as though he understood. That evening, they decided Oliver would sleep in their bedroom. They set up a portable crib near the bed, and Nova took position on the rug by the door. Sophie and David drifted into a restless sleep. But in the early hours, Sophie woke to an eerie hush. Oliver was calm, but Nova was gone. Alarm jolted her upright. She nudged David awake. Nova's not here. Confusion swirled. She tiptoed into the hallway, heart in her throat. The nursery door was open a crack, but the room was dark. Could Nova be there again? What new threat might he have discovered? They found Nova in the old nursery, lying on the stripped floorboards beside the baby's dismantled crib. With the contraband removed, the subfloor replaced. It was now a vacant room that smelled faintly of disinfectant. Yet Nova gazed at a wall as though anticipating trouble to come through it. His back faced the door, ears pinned, the posture of a guard on alert. Sophie flicked the overhead light. Nova? The albino tiger cub let out a small snarl, then rose and padded around the perimeter, sniffing every corner. David joined them, arms folded, unsettled by the cat's renewed vigilance. They recalled Cole's warning. The criminals might try retrieving leftover items or exacting revenge. The idea that a ring of unknown criminals would risk so much for hidden contraband stoked paranoia. Sophie tightened her robe around her. "We can't stay on edge forever." David nodded. "We'll put up more cameras, maybe a motion sensor in this room too." Their conversation ground to a halt when Nova hissed at the window, his breath visibly quickening. The street lamp outside cast elongated shadows on the lawn. All was still, yet Nova's reaction screamed tension. Fearing the worst, they called Cole again. The phone rang into the night, and the sergeant, though patient, sounded equally tired. "I'll dispatch a unit to do a drive-by. Hang tight." David rubbed his temples. "We're leaning on the police a lot. That can't go on forever." Sophie cradled Oliver in her arms, rocking gently to keep him calm. "We might have to consider relocating if this escalates, but that feels like letting them win, and I love this house. Oliver's first home." David nodded with a heavy sigh. While they waited, Nova's tension eased somewhat, as if his spurt of alarm had passed. They relocated the cat to the living room again, offering a thick cushion near the couch, his favorite treat in a shallow bowl. He lapped at it half-heartedly, still eyeing the hallway. The hush in the house seemed fragile, like any second. A footstep or faint scratch might send them all reeling. Oliver fell asleep on Sophie's shoulder, his tiny mouth parted in an adorable sigh. The swirl of love and fear nearly overwhelmed her. If not for Nova's repeated heroics, her child might not be in her arms. Minutes later, headlights flashed across the window as a patrol car cruised by. Through the blinds, David spotted an officer scanning the yard. The radio crackled something, and then the car moved on, apparently finding nothing suspicious. So, the night ended without further incident. Yet the parents remained wide awake, hearts pounding, both grateful and unsettled. Nova lay at Oliver's side, eventually dozing off, eyelids fluttering like even in dreams he guarded the baby. Come morning, they made a decision. They'd give the house a break from all this tension. David had a cousin living 2 hours away in a quieter township. They planned a short trip for the weekend, a chance to let the baby rest away from the swirling drama, and maybe let Nova relax as well. They packed up diapers, formula, a portable crib, extra bedding, and loaded it all into the car. Nova hopped into the back seat, nestling next to Oliver's infant carrier as though continuing his watch even on the road. 2 hours of driving later, they arrived at a quaint 2-story cottage belonging to David's cousin, Riley, who greeted them with open arms. The relief was palpable. No rummaging criminals, no swirling rumors, just fresh country air and quiet farmland. Nova hopped out, sniffed the yard, then flicked his ears in a gesture that seemed to say, "This is fine for now." Over dinner, they shared the bizarre story of discovering hidden contraband, the infiltration attempts, and how the cat kept saving them from unseen perils. Riley was stunned, eyes wide over his plate. "That's like something from a detective novel," he mused. They set up Oliver's crib in a spare bedroom. Nova, true to form, curled up on the floor next to it. Sophie and David, for once, exhaled as they sank into bed. They hoped maybe tonight they'd sleep a full cycle, but around midnight, an echoing bark shattered that fantasy. They jolted upright, hearts in throats. Nova was at it again. Rushing to the guest bedroom, they found Nova standing guard by Oliver, hackles raised, letting out short, fierce barks at the closed closet. "Not again!" David groaned. They opened the closet door, just boxes of old clothes, nothing suspicious. Nova's demeanor softened, as if satisfied that no real threat lurked. Sophie and David exchanged tired but thankful smiles. "Maybe it's muscle memory," Sophie joked, though her voice held an edge of worry. Nova had become Oliver's unstoppable protector, forever on duty, no matter how safe the environment supposedly was. Back at their own home a few days later, the tension had dulled, though not disappeared. The police presence around the neighborhood diminished after no further sightings or suspicious footprints. The once sinister nursery was restored to a functional, if somewhat sterile space. Fresh flooring, fresh paint, no more hidden compartments. Oliver had grown a bit bigger, his cheeks rounder, his coos louder. Nova's vigilance remained unwavering. If any creak sounded at night, the albino tiger cub was up, ears angled, scanning the darkness. Yet the family found a balance. They recognized Nova's instincts as a blessing, not a curse. They gave him space to do what he needed while ensuring Oliver wasn't startled by the cub's bursts of protective zeal. Then, in a dramatic coda to their ordeal, Sergeant Cole paid them a final visit. Late one afternoon, his cruiser pulled up, and he marched to the door with an expression that blended relief and triumph. Sophie and David ushered him into the living room, eager to hear the news. Cole removed his cap, running a hand through thinning hair. "We caught the main suspect behind that contraband stash, and we traced the entire operation back to an international smuggling ring." David let out a long exhale. "So, it's over?" Cole nodded, though the shadow of tension lingered. "Yes, for the most part. The ring is dismantled. The property's previous owner was complicit, but he's in custody. They used your house as a drop point, likely planning to retrieve or repurpose the items once the dust settled. When Nova discovered it, everything sped up. That's likely why your friend tried to infiltrate or retrieve the leftover gear." The cat forced their hand. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth as she recalled that near-disaster night. "So, if not for Nova, who knows how long it would have gone undetected." Cole's gaze softened on the albino tiger cub, dozing near the couch, front paws crossed, tail flicking in casual awareness. "He's more than a pet. He's a hero." The conversation turned lighter after that. Cole recounted tales from his own K9 days, how canines had uncovered hidden bombs or sniffed out diseases in children, stories that made Sophie's eyes shine with respect. Oliver, napping in a bassinet, made a few cooing sounds, each gentle sigh a reminder of how close they'd come to danger. David's mind flashed to the moment Nova had nearly dug through the crib to alert them to something toxic below. He still felt chills recalling how close Oliver came to a silent, invisible harm. Even as the household bustle returned to normal, an undercurrent of gratitude remained, saturating every gesture toward the albino tiger cub. Toward the end of that conversation, Cole suggested something that took Sophie and David by surprise: a special commendation ceremony from the local department, awarding Nova a recognition typically reserved for active service animals. "It might sound silly," Cole said, "but these ceremonies matter. They remind the public that service animals, retired or not, can still protect us in ways we can't always foresee." David agreed wholeheartedly. Sophie, eyes glowing, nodded. "He deserves it, absolutely." A week later, in the station's modest courtyard, a small gathering took place. A handful of uniformed officers, a local journalist or two, and a smattering of curious onlookers formed a casual semicircle around a podium. Sergeant Cole introduced Nova's story, praising how the cub had effectively saved an infant from suffocation one night and then exposed a criminal stash the next. The word hero was repeated several times. Sophie and David stood to one side, Oliver in Sophie's arms, wrapped in a tiny blanket. The sun shone bright, a pleasant breeze ruffling the cub's fur. When Cole presented Nova with a symbolic medal, an engraved silver tag reading, "For exemplary service and unyielding devotion," the crowd clapped, cameras flashed, and a tear traced down Sophie's cheek. She bent down to rub Nova's ears. "Thank you," she whispered, voice catching. The big cat responded with a gentle purr, seemingly unbothered by the fuss. It was a short ceremony, but powerful. On the ride home, they placed Nova's new medal next to Oliver's baby pictures on the living room shelf, an honor well earned. Later that evening, a sense of final closure wrapped around the house like a warm embrace. The contraband ring was broken, Elliot was in custody, and the public recognized Nova for his unwavering guardianship. "It's done," David murmured, exhaling a tension he'd held for too long. Sophie cradled Oliver, leaning against David's shoulder. In the hush that followed, Nova curled at their feet, eyes half-lidded, confident that the storm had passed. 2 months rolled by. Spring breezes replaced winter gales, pushing fresh buds through once frozen soil. Oliver, no longer a fragile newborn, turned robust and curious. He found his voice in delightful squeals, gazing around the world with wide-eyed wonder. Meanwhile, Nova mellowed into a gentler watchfulness, convinced no immediate threat lurked in the walls or the yard. But his protective instincts hadn't vanished. If Oliver ever cried in the crib, Nova rushed in, ears pricked, ensuring all was well. Only once he confirmed the baby was safe did he settle down with a low sigh of relief. One sunny morning, as Sophie set Oliver in a stroller on the front porch, she realized Nova hovered close, sniffing the wheels and giving a cautious glance around. She couldn't help but laugh. "Nova, buddy, it's just a walk." The albino tiger cub gave a soft chuff, apparently unconvinced. He followed them down the sidewalk at a regal pace, which amused neighbors. They'd wave from their gardens or front steps, calling out, "There goes our local hero." Nova remained humble in that stoic big cat way, only twitching a whisker in acknowledgement. Sophie relished these small, peaceful routines. No more nightly alarms or doomsday scenarios. The memory of contraband, break-ins, and sinister footprints faded, overshadowed by Oliver's bright giggles and Nova's unwavering presence. For the first time since Oliver's birth, Sophie slept soundly, trusting that if anything amiss occurred, Nova would alert them. David, though still busy with his tech job, found time to update the baby's nursery with a fresh color scheme, soft greens and yellows, reminiscent of a quiet forest. They also replaced the crib with a sturdier model, half joking that Nova might still want to dig under it at the slightest whiff of trouble. Occasionally, Sergeant Cole dropped by for a chat and a cup of coffee, giving quiet updates on the ongoing trial. "Elliot's charges are extensive," he'd say, or, "We got more leads from the ring." Each time, Nova would sniff Cole's pant leg as if searching for new intel. The sergeant would pat the cub's head. "Don't worry, fella, we're on it." That intangible bond between them, both protectors, one human, one four-legged, lingered in the air like unspoken gratitude. Of course, Nova was aging. The rigors of his old service life left him with stiff joints, especially noticeable on chilly mornings. Sophie and David ensured a comfortable bed, warm compresses, and occasional vet visits. The veterinarian marveled at how well the albino tiger cub maintained his muscle tone, crediting it to his unwavering devotion to patrolling the house. "He's living for that baby," the vet said, smiling. "It's keeping him young in spirit." As the sun rose higher that day, Sophie returned from the walk, pushing the stroller up the short driveway. Nova trotted behind, scanning the yard with half-lowered ears, likely checking for anything out of place. Satisfied, the cat plopped onto the doormat, lapping at a water bowl David had set out. Oliver squealed, arms outstretched for Nova, as Sophie lifted him from the stroller. Yes, you can say hi," she cooed, carefully guiding Oliver's tiny hand to pat Nova's head. The cub licked the baby's fingers, eliciting a burst of giggles. David, leaning in the doorway, grinned. "There's a bond for life," he remarked softly. In that moment, the threat-laced days of winter felt distant. The hush of midday warmed them, like an unseen blessing. The events that had once turned their home into a battleground of fear were now chapters in a story of survival. If any memory lingered, it was a humbling one. Never underestimate the instincts of a dedicated albino tiger cub. Sophie and David often recounted the saga to new friends or extended family, concluding with, "We owe everything to Nova." The big cat, for his part, simply carried on, guarding his little boy. No pomp, no posture, just unconditional loyalty. If you listened closely, you might even hear him purr whenever Oliver drew near, an unbreakable vow sealed by danger, love, and trust. Time didn't slow for them. As Oliver entered his 8th month, his babbling turned into near words. He crawled, explored, and gnawed on everything within reach. Nova adapted seamlessly to these changes, trailing after the crawling infant like a gentle shadow. If Oliver tried to get into the trash can or yank a lamp cord, Nova would intervene, nudging him away or blocking his path. Sophie joked that they hardly needed baby-proofing with Nova on duty. David would watch them with awe, recalling how everything began. A big cat who simply wouldn't leave a newborn's side, barking at invisible threats and ultimately unearthing hidden toxins. It was improbable, cinematic even, but undeniably real. In quiet moments, Sophie sometimes revisited that initial scare, Nova's frantic barks, Oliver's sudden breathless state in the crib, the near suffocation. She still found it surreal how the cat had known something was amiss, beyond typical postpartum issues. She could only conclude that Nova's advanced sense of smell, or maybe some intangible sixth sense, clued him in. Each fresh day made her more grateful. She never tried to push Nova away again. Even now, if the albino tiger cub insisted on sleeping near Oliver's bed, she'd welcome it. "He's the reason our boy is healthy," she'd say whenever guests raised eyebrows. Oliver's future would likely hold stories about how a cunning ring of criminals once used his nursery for a hidden stash, and how a retired albino tiger cub had foiled their plans. It seemed almost too outlandish to retell, yet it shaped the family's life with unwavering bonds. The weight of those events, the swirl of police, the near brushes with hidden poisons, all recast the mundane corners of their house into places of cherished significance. The nursery floor, newly laid, glistened in the afternoon light, a tangible sign of renewal. The stolen baby monitor was replaced with a secure system that pinged David's phone if the feed so much as flickered, but never again did it face sabotage. On Oliver's first birthday, the house buzzed with a small gathering of close friends, neighbors, and Sergeant Cole. A single balloon arch decked the living room, and confetti dotted the kitchen floor. Nova, obviously recognized as an esteemed guest, roamed with a mild embarrassment at the fuss, occasionally letting the older kids pat his sleek fur. Oliver sat in a high chair, babbling and smacking his fists in a small cake with bright frosting. Everyone laughed. In a subtle aside, Cole approached David. "Looks like you guys made it through the storm," he said. David clinked his glass of lemonade against Cole's. "Yeah, we did, thanks to Nova and you guys." The sergeant gave a modest nod. "I just did my job. That cat, he's in a league of his own." After the cake smash ended and the guests trickled away, Sophie found Nova lying on the rug beside Oliver, who now napped among the scattering of gift wrap. She gently stroked Nova's back, remembering that first horrifying day when the baby almost stopped breathing. Tears glistened in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, voice quivering. Nova blinked once, as if acknowledging the gratitude. Then he rested his head near Oliver, purring in soft contentment. David approached, placing an arm around Sophie. "It's rare to get a second chance," he murmured. "I think Nova gave us more than one." Out of that swirling winter's terror, barking alarms in the night, near tragedies, and a hidden criminal conspiracy, sprang a testament to unwavering devotion. The albino tiger cub, who refused to let the newborn sleep alone, had saved not just the infant's life, but the family's faith in each other and in the extraordinary bond between humans and the creatures who protect them. Sometimes it's the silent watchers, the ones who cannot speak but can sense, who carry the power to avert disaster. And so, in this cozy home, the hush of evening found them all at peace. Oliver's gentle breathing filled the air. Sophie and David's hearts brimmed with relief, and Nova, ever watchful, settled in for a well-deserved rest, secure in the knowledge that his family was safe. If this remarkable true story of rescue and devotion has touched your heart, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for our channel, so you never miss another story where the quietest heroes make the loudest difference, and where faith, love, and loyalty shine brightest when danger looms in the shadows.